kind of new. All right, it's getting close to 1, so we'll just give everybody a couple more minutes to get here. I will check out my thread piles, make sure I have everything. I was going through all my thread yesterday. One of the problems, well, it's not really a problem, but the hard part of doing this virtually is that when I do it in person with groups, I'm passing thread around, so you actually get to feel it and touch it, and you get to really experience it. And we don't have feel-o-vision yet. One day, I'm sure we will. And there was just too many people registered to actually send everybody spools of thread, because that would have taken me forever to wrap cards with different threads. But you know, if you have the threads, you can look afterwards, maybe get together with some friends afterwards and purchase a bunch of different weights if you don't have a bunch of different weights, and just get a feel for them. Schedule yourself a play day. That is the best thing. That's actually the best way to work through my book, is by scheduling a play day with your friends once a week. And so then you don't all have to have all the supplies. You don't have to have all the different types of thread. And you can just get going with experimenting and stuff. So let me get started here. So welcome to my studio. This is part of my studio, about half of my studio behind me. I do sell some thread, mostly the hand stitching threads. And I am currently in Washington State. We moved from Colorado in December. That was kind of the part of the pandemic. So let me just start with thread weights, because thread weights are so confusing, and there's a reason for that. So when you look at the spools of thread, they all have, you know, a little weight on them, on the tops or on the side. It tells you what the weight is. And exactly what is that? Well, that is actually designed for the industry, not us home sewers. So the thread is designed for industrial sewing. It's designed for Nike and, you know, shoe manufacturers and clothing manufacturers and sail manufacturers. And that's what the threads are designed for. And that's why their weights don't necessarily make sense to us. The thread companies have tried to make it sort of easy to understand, but, you know, there's text, there's weight, there's I'm going to blank about the different ones, but there's different words that mean thread weight. And you can't, like, the way they measure polyester doesn't really correlate with the way they measure cotton thread, because it's made a completely different way. So there's really no correlation. So that's why it doesn't make any sense to us. And on top of that, needle sizes are backwards from thread. A size 100 thread is very fine. Size 100 needle is very thick. So you've got that going against you for figuring it out. And threads from the same manufacturer that are the exact same weight, but different colors, can be slightly different. So there's all these things, and the reality is, does it really matter? And it does a little bit, but all the 30, 28, 60, 50, you know, those numbers are so close. So when we wrote the book Threads, my co-author and I decided to reorganize the thread weight system. So we came up with ultra fine, fine, medium, heavy, and ultra heavy threads. So those are a little bit broader categories so that the threads could fit in them a little bit better. And they all have different uses. And I want to stop here for a minute and just say that I haven't done this lecture since before COVID, so I might be a little bit scattered in the linearness of it. I'm not very linear anyway. I kind of go off on tangents, but that's my little disclaimer. So first, I'm going to talk about the really ultra fine threads, and those are the 100 weight threads and 80 weight threads. And you're like, why do we need thread that fine? They're actually super useful. I like using them when I'm trying to do something that I don't want the thread to have a thickness that is felt on the fabric. I made a jacket out of rayon where I used the ultra fine threads, 100 weight thread to do the seams, because it was just a fold over seam, and it's super flat because I didn't have that heavy thread, and it didn't, you couldn't really even see it, which is another advantage of it. If you like to do needle turn applique and you don't want your thread to be seen, the 100 weight threads are fabulous for that. I used to do demos in my books for it, but you could never see the thread, so it didn't photograph well, so we just quit doing that one. But I do have samples where you can see that you can't even see the thread. You have to pull the fabric apart to actually see the stitches, even if you use a contrasting color. So you don't need quite as much. And with both the ultra fine and the fine threads, they fill up your bobbin so much better. So you don't have to change your bobbin out very often. Of course, it depends on what you're doing. So everything I say depends on what you're doing. And I'm going to try and give you lots of different examples, so you're using the right thread for the right job. So some of the examples I have of 100 weight are... see if I can get this thread wrap off. This one is called Invisible. It's not invisible, though it's almost invisible. See if you can see that a little bit better. So this is, I was trying to get a color thread that would show it better, but this seems to be flickering. Super fine, and it's polyester. Now you will find most of the 100 weight threads are polyester because it's really hard to have cotton that thin. There is one that is made for heirloom sewing that is 100 weight, but it's very, very fragile. It's really not meant to have any stress on it. And then this one is by Mylar, and it is called, I don't have the right reading glasses on, Metrocene, and it is also 100 weight. So this comes on a nice big spool. If you buy like a couple spools of these really fine threads in kind of neutral colors, you'll use them forever. I hardly ever use the red one because I just tend to use the neutral colors. There's also 100 weight silk thread. So let me see. Can you see that? Nope, not really. Camera can't hardly pick that up. This one's in white. Maybe that will show up better. Oh yeah, there you go. 100 weight in silk. So these are lovely to sew with, but of course, being silk thread, they are more expensive. I have a very funny story about silk thread. So eons ago, I was taking a hand applique class from a national well-known teacher, and I was so excited about the class, and she suggested silk thread. She didn't say anything other than silk thread. She didn't indicate any kind of thickness. So the only silk thread available in town was actually it was like a thicker than a medium weight. So it was probably about a 30 weight silk thread, more for buttonholes. So we all show up with all this silk thread, and she never said she was using the same thread. So maybe she didn't know, maybe somebody had told her silk thread was the way to go. So I kept stitching my applique pieces, like, you can see this thread. What is the deal? I don't see how this silk thread is worth all that extra money because I can see that thread. But obviously we were supposed to be using silk 100 weight thread. And we did not have that direction. So don't always, not everything a teacher says is exact. We are all fallible. The other thing about silk thread, it's hard to find lots of different colors. Not very many places carry it. You probably have to get it online. So for needle turn applique, I use 100 weight polyester most of the time if I don't want my stitches to be seen. Now, I don't do that particularly very often, but it's so much, it just is so easy to needle turn applique that way because the stitches are, they're just invisible. So you can actually be a little bit messy and no one will ever see them. It's really strong. If you have a 100 weight cotton, it's not going to be very strong. A 100 weight silk and a 100 weight poly will both be really strong, and you can use it for a bed quilt or on a garment or something, and it'll be great, and no one will ever see your stitches. So the next size up is the fine threads. And I define that as 60 and 70 weight. So this one is Bobbin Fill by Madeira. And this one is Katona by Madeira. Oh no, that one's a 50 weight. I have these little bins, all my threads divided, but and the other one, is Deco Bob. Here's my Deco Bob. I use this thread a lot. It's also by Wonderful. A lot of the threads I use are by Wonderful. I used to work with them very closely when I started all this thread journey. They are the first company to carry all these what I call the end threads, the ultra fine and the fine and the heavy and the ultra heavy. They were the first company to really bring it to the market for us to play with. So I worked a lot with them, and they actually sponsored our first book that we did just for them. So this one is 70 weight. It's a little bit stronger than the 100 weight. And it's got a little bit of a tooth to it. The way it's made, it's got a little bit of a, I don't know how else to describe it, a little bit of a tooth. So if you have a problem on your machine with threads coming off too fast, like the ultra fine threads, go to the 70 weight thread. Now with these threads, the other advantage is you can use a much smaller needle, so you get much smaller holes. They are great for garment sewing, especially things that are very sheer or lightweight, and you don't want the heavy threads kind of being like, here I am, I'm the thread that is holding this thing together. So the 70 weight threads are great for that. I also use those for needle turn applique. It depends on the color. Though a lot of times I don't match my color. I just kind of pick a neutral color because you can't really see it very well anyway. I think that is the, let me check the questions really quick to see if there's anything. Someone asked and answered the question. The title of my book is Threads, the Basics and Beyond, and it's available at artisticartifacts.com, and they mail over, or they will ship all over the world. So no problem there. Okay, so that's those ultra light and light threads. I didn't use them for really long. Oh, I wanted to talk about the bobbin. Oh my gosh, so much thread fits on the bobbin. When I'm doing free motion embroidery, I use the fine or ultra fine threads on the bobbin. You can stitch so much longer without the bobbin running out, which is the most annoying. You've just been stitching away for 20 minutes and like, oh, my bobbin's out. So I really, really love it on the bobbin. Sometimes, I didn't bring I'll have to go grab my foot, my tension disc thing, whatever it's called. So on my machine, I have a rotary hook machine, a Bernina. The bobbin case has a little tiny pigtail, and it's got a hole in it. That hole is for when you're working with these ultra fine threads and the fine threads, so that you'll add just a little bit of tension onto that thread without having to adjust your bobbin case tension. And that's really handy when you're stitching a lot. You just put it in there and you don't have to change very much. Now I use these fine threads no matter what I have on top, and that's the beauty of being able to grab these threads and have them. I just have wound bobbins full of them, grab them, and I don't have to change thread color all the time. It very rarely pulls up when I'm doing free motion embroidery, which is like the most irritating problem, is when your bobbin thread is pulling up. And I'll talk about tension in a little bit. This is not just going to be about thread. I want to solve tension is one of the problems people have with thread. So we're going to talk about that too. So I don't see any other questions about those two categories of thread. Like I said, they're just, give them a try. We tend to stay away from those end threads, but they are so nice to use, and so just wonderful. I do have a couple more that I wanted to talk about sort of sideline. So this is a serger thread. Mine is cotton. I changed to all cotton serger threads this last year, trying to green up my studio a little bit, be a little bit more conscientious of the threads I'm using. And it is, they don't really have a weight on them, but it's a finer thread. So do not sew with your serger thread unless you're using the serger, because these threads are designed to be used 3 and 4 strands at a time. If you're just using one strand of this, because it's inexpensive, so it's really tempting to use, and the polyester ones are super cheap. Sometimes you can find the spools for like $2 on clearance, depending on color seasons or whatever. But these definitely don't be tempted to use these for piecing or garment sewing all by themselves. They're really designed to be used multi-strand. Oh, and I forgot about this one. So this one is Alfina by Wonderful, and it is a 60 weight. I can't really tell very nice. It's really lovely. They actually kind of developed this for needle turn applique. It works nice if you want to stick to cotton and not polyester. I do have a little rant about the cotton polyester stage. So I used to be a quilter. Well, first I was an embroiderer, then I was a quilter, and then now I'm a mixed media artist. So when I was a quilter, of course, we were told never, ever, ever use polyester threads on your quilts because it will rip your fabric. And that is such an old wives' tale. So what happens is that, especially back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, polyester thread was very different from the threads we have today. Polyester threads were much thicker, and they were not as flexible, and there was no such thing as a 100 weight polyester thread. So they were just not as flexible. Sometimes they would melt, and so there was a good reason, but they never really cut the fabric. What happened is that would be a point of stress, the seams. So when somebody's using your quilt, or, they curl up in it and there's tension on those threads and that fabric, well, the polyester thread is stronger than the cotton fabric. So that is why it was ripping. It's not that the thread was ripping the fabric, but the fabric was ripping because it was being abraded. So that's where the old adage came from. But what I found funny was that I think it was in the early 90s, maybe, a couple companies came out with, I think it was mostly Superior, these designer threads. This one is John Flynn, and then they had Alex Anderson designer threads, and they were both polyester, but they never said that. You have to really look. It's in tiny print on the label. So they were introduced as like these great new quilting threads, and nobody thought that they would be polyester, so nobody asked. So I thought that was kind of funny, the way the industry was trying to bring the idea that you could use polyester threads on your quilts back into the quilting world. So that is the 60 weight threads, and 60 weight I still consider a fine thread. Then I want to talk about the 50 weights. The 50 weight seems to be the hottest thing now, especially in the quilt market, is the idea of using 50 weight threads and 60 weight threads. So, but what they don't tell you is that those threads need to be densely quilted. The 50 weight threads are not as strong as your average utilitarian thread, which is 40 weight. Almost all the utility threads we use are 40 weight. So if you're going to use these lovely 50 and 60 weight threads to quilt your quilt, you must stitch very densely. I had a friend who thought she was buying this really expensive, well, it was really expensive. She thought she was buying the best thread for her quilt, but it wasn't. It was a much more modern quilt, and it was not densely stitched. So when the couple started using it, all the threads started popping because it was too much tension on any particular on the thread because it wasn't strong enough for that. So just know what you want to do before you pick the thread that you're going to use. Like, what's the end use of that product or that garment, or, you know, is it home deck? Is it a quilt? You definitely don't want to use those lighter weight threads if you're not going to be quilting very densely. If you are quilting densely, they are fabulous. Some of the most beautiful micro quilting. Oh, I have a sample here. I wonder if you can see it. This is my micro quilting sample. Let me see if the camera will pick it up. Maybe I can't tell how well you guys can see that, but because I used a 100 weight thread, and I used Invisifill, and I used a size 60 needle, so you don't really see the holes. So you get this flat, fabulous texture with the micro quilting, but you don't really see the thread very much. It's not very obvious. It kind of blends in. On that sample, I was using a pale green thread on this yellow green background. So it was, I think it's just very cool. And I've seen some big projects done with the tiny threads, and they're just stunning. But you do need to do dense quilting with that. One thing, since I showed you this book, let me go back, because I usually start my thread lecture with this. I told you I was probably going to skip around a little bit. So when I was learning about thread, I did not know all this stuff. This is how I found out. I created a mess. This is just a small sample of the messes, the experiments, the playing with thread. So when I moved, I threw a big giant pile away, but I kept some so you could see that you have to experiment. Nobody was born knowing how to do this, and we tend to kind of think that, you know, some people have this gift and this talent of doing it right off the bat, and that's just not the case. Everybody has to experiment and explore and figure out the dance between your sewing machine and these threads in order to play with it. So let me check. I don't see any more questions. Oh, 50 weight for machine quilting. So yes, Margaret, I was trying to say that 50 weight for machine quilting is great as long as you are not stitching very far apart. You want to have much more densely stitched stitching. So, you know, if it says you can have it 3 inches apart, according to your batting, you know, go to 2 inches apart, because the 50 weight threads, I know my kids, and it depends. Is the quilt for, you know, kids? Is the quilt for an elderly person? Is the quilt for a baby? It ain't going to be washed a lot. You really want to make it last. So I would quilt it more densely. The 50 weight is great, and so is the 60 weight and the 100 weight. It's all about the density of the quilting that will keep it really strong and allow your fabric and thread to not break. Allow your fabric to not break your threads. Allow your thread to not break, because your fabric's not going to break. Okay, any other questions about those? All right, so let's go to the medium weight threads. And medium weight threads are what I call the utility threads. It's the threads we use the most of. And I will spend the least amount of time on these threads because it's the ones we're the most comfortable with. Cotton, polyester, and remember, like I said before, the polyester threads are not technically, you know, they're kind of that mid-weight. Technically, they may say like 40 tex or 50 tex, but they're in that utility weight. So embroidery threads, your rayon embroidery threads, your polyester embroidery threads, your quilting threads, and your cotton covered polyester threads, your Coats and Clark. Let me talk a little bit about brands. When I was writing the Threads book, I received thread from pretty much every company. There was one company that didn't want to participate, but every other company sent me thread to try. And I got some threads that were off-brand, and I got some threads, I bought threads that were one-of-a-kind designer threads, and there is no bad thread out there except for old thread. And those thread they sell in the little packets for emergency fixing your clothes, thread repair kits, those are pretty bad threads. But there's really no bad thread out there. So there's so many people say, Coates and Clark is a bad thread, or Gutermann is a bad thread, and you have to use this thread. And I have a really hard time with that, because not everybody can afford Italian designer thread. And in my experiments, it's not any better than the cheaper threads, the less expensive threads. There's one quilt company that sells their own branded thread that's actually quite lovely. It sews really nicely. So don't get caught up in the price, because what's the most important thing? Oh, that color looks terrible. The red looks terrible against my chair and that. Anyway, I'm always an artist. The thing that's the most important when you're sewing is the color. You want it to match your garment, you want it to match your pillows, you want it to match your quilt or contrast. So it's the color that's most important. And don't be dissuaded by the fact that it's a little bit less expensive. You can do a test for older thread. If you can break it just by pulling it apart, then it's rotten and you don't want to use it. If thread was stored in an attic, or garage where it gets really, has high temperature swings, it's usually the heat that kind of destroys the cotton. But so you can just test and then use that. If it's breaks too easily, or if you use it in your machine, it just constantly breaks, then you want to use, you don't want to use it in construction, but there's lots of other things you can do with it. I'll tell you more about that, how you can find out those things later. But so the utility threads are, they're the ones we use the most. Do not shy away from cotton-covered polyester. That actually works really well for garments. Depends on the garment. If you're sewing jeans, you want cotton-covered polyester. It's going to be much stronger than just cotton. And if you're, some things only come in polyester. I was doing outdoor cushion sewing, and that thread's all polyester. So as much as I prefer to stick with cotton, and I do wherever I can, cotton or rayon, I'm not a slave to it. There's just not that much thread waste in sewing that you need to worry too much about it. With the embroidery threads, I have a spool of rayon and a spool of polyester. Tried to get the same color. I know you're not going to be able to see this on the video because it's too hard to tell, because it really depends on the light. So some people have problems with rayon, some people swear by polyester, and the key is they both work wonderfully. Polyester usually has a little bit of a tooth to it. It's not quite so smooth, so it doesn't come off the spool as fast as a rayon thread. But the difference between them is the strength and the look. So you have to decide who you're stitching for. If I'm doing anything for kids or on something that's going to be a braided, like if you were stitching on a bag, a jacket, a seatbelt would rub on, you want to use polyester. It's going to be much stronger. But if you're stitching on something that's an evening bag or a beautiful silk jacket, you want to use the rayon, because the way it reflects light is the biggest difference in my book. So the rayon has this little sheen where the polyester reflects light different. So it's just kind of different and subtle. And the rayon threads are slightly more expensive, but not enough to make a difference. They're both really great, and they both come in bazillion colors. And you can usually find them just about anywhere. All right, now we're going to talk about metallic threads. Metallic threads are also in the medium weight thread category, as most decorative threads are, the embroidery threads. And so I know a lot of people have a problem with metallic threads. They are so they can be so frustrating, and after this, you will have no problems. I assure you, you're going to be so excited to go work with metallic threads. So first I want to clear up a difference. So this is a Mylar thread, and this is a metallic thread. Mylar threads are made out of plastic, and they're much easier to sew with. They have a little bit of a stretch to them. They have a little bit of a give. You don't need a special needle. You don't need to do anything differently when you're using the Mylar threads. If you're finding they tend to stretch and break, so if there's an issue, it would be, you'll be able to tell because it'll kind of spring back on itself where it broke. But really, if you just sew a tiny bit slower, you'll have no problems with these Mylar threads. It's, I think, one of the reasons they're more popular. But they do have a different look. They definitely reflect the light and sparkle differently from the metallic threads. So keep that in mind. Depends what you're doing. If you're doing water sparkles, then this is great. If you're doing something more elegant, you may not want to have that in your face blingy sparkle. So the biggest problem I discovered with metallic threads, so the way they're made is quite interesting. So it's a core, there's a core, and then there's laminated layers on top. And the core can either be polyester or rayon. The polyester used to be stiffer than the rayon core, but now I don't see quite as big a difference. I still think the rayon core is a little bit softer, a little bit easier to use, but it's not that big a deal as anymore since they've manufacturing better polyester threads. So see, oh good, you can see this. So the problem, do you see how this is coming off? The metallic thread does have actual metal in it. So it has a little bit of a memory. And the longer it's on a spool, the more memory it's going to get. So this is the problem. See how kinky it is? So this is Wonderfil's brand. It's on a thicker spool. Let me get to a new section. So it has just a gentle wave that coming off the spool. That is going to save you so much when you realize that it's a spool issue, not a thread issue. I've used all the different types of metallic threads out there. I've free motion stitched with them. I've done just lots of stitched on paper with them, all kinds of different things. And the issue is really the spool. If you can find these giant spools, they're the best because they really have very little curl to them because they're not tight on there. The other problem with the way they're wound sometimes, and this goes for all threads, is that if you've ever seen, go Google a picture of the inside of a thread factory. It's fascinating because the thread's like going back and forth like this giant cat's cradle, like a bazillion times through all these tension guides before it's getting onto these little spools. So any little thing that can go wrong could go wrong, can go wrong. So we tend to think that the problem is with us, but most often it's not the problem with us. It's not the problem with the thread, it's the spool. So a couple things you can do to fix that. One is to put this behind your machine in a jar or on a thread stand. And you may have to put it a ways behind your machine to give it time to relax before it gets up to your needle. Don't have it in the jar like this, because then you're pulling the spool along with it. You want to have it here so the thread is just coming up like that. And I had one spool that I had to put like 2 feet away from my machine. Put a little paper clip on the back of your machine as a thread guide. Make sure you don't put it to the side of your machine where your flywheel is. Did that once. It was quite the mess. Don't do that. Behind your machine. And there's lots of different thread guides, thread stands you can get, but a jar works, or a cup works just as well. We all have broken jars and cups around. And my other tips are use this ultralight or lightweight thread in the bobbin. Nobody ever told me when I first started sewing with metallic thread that I should not use cotton thread in the bobbin, because nobody knew. It was like, well, some people obviously knew, but I didn't know. I didn't know those people. So we just used cotton thread in the bobbin. No matter what you were using the top, I admit I actually threw a spool of thread across the room in frustration once. Was not so good. The cat had fun, but yeah, I did a big mess to clean up afterwards. So the problem is metallic thread. Remember I said it's made with these layers and it has actual metal in it. It has these little snaggy areas. I don't know. It's textured. It's got some texture to it. So when you take this texture and also rub it with the cotton thread texture, it's gonna not go smoothly. If you only switch to these lighter weight threads, it will just change your life. Besides, you don't have to change your bobbin case as often, which is always good. So yeah, I sometimes use a metallic needle, not always. Well, let me just talk about needles right now. And since you've registered, you're going to get a couple emails from me, and one of them is my notes about needles. It's kind of a 2-page article that I wrote about needles and all the different uses. I also wrote a little book, Know Your Needles, which is machine and hand stitching needles. And so needles, like I said, they're backwards from the thread size, so that can be confusing. But there's a whole bunch of different needles. And first, I'm just going to talk about sewing machine needles, not embroidery needles. So sewing machine needles, you want to use the smallest needle for the thread that you're using. But you also want to use the appropriate needle. With metallic threads, I use an embroidery needle. And like I said before, everything depends on the final product that you're working on. A lot of artists I know recommend that you use a top stitch needle. Here's the thing. A top stitch needle, if you're top stitching or straight stitching with the feed dogs up, top stitch needle is fine. Because the top stitch needle has a very sharp, firm shaft. So it doesn't bend. It's like a little soldier. It's supposed to do these straight stitches. So that's what it wants to do, is go straight. But if you are doing free motion embroidery or any kind of free motion stitching, you want to use an embroidery needle, not a top stitch needle. It's the embroidery needle has a little bit of flex to it, so when you're moving and the needle has a little bit of give, you also break fewer needles and have fewer skip stitches. That's kind of my biggest pet peeve is when people tell people to use the wrong needle. It's like, no, if you're top stitching, use a top stitching needle, but it really just wants to go straight. So if you're stitching with your feed dogs up, that's great. If you're stitching with your feed dogs down, use an embroidery needle. And that actually goes for all the threads. And there's piecing needles, which is a microtex. The microtex is very sharp and it's made for going straight. It works great for piecing. It's much thinner. The shaft is thinner than the embroidery needle. So I'm kind of lazy and sometimes I don't change my needles between different types of stitching. Let's just be real here. So you do want to change your needle often. They're inexpensive, so don't use the same needle for every project. I have a billion needles. So, well, because I used to have a thread store and we did lots of classes. So I made this little pincushion with just my different sizes. So I would use them. I used to separate them out, ones that had been used to stitch on paper and metal and such. But I'm going to be real honest with you. I go from stitching on silk to stitching on paper to stitching on metal with the same needle, and I don't change it. I'm using an embroidery needle, and I'm doing free motion stitching most of the time. So that's like, there's rules and then there's rules. You can break the rules. Just in, the expediency of time. And it works. I don't really have a problem, but I also change my needles pretty often. As soon as I hear a slightest bit of difference in the stitch, and if you stitch a lot, you know what I'm talking about. That little, instead of poke, 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 it's more like thunk, thunk, thunk. You can tell when your needle is is getting dull, definitely want to change your needles often. They're really inexpensive. And I highly suggest you just stock up on them. You know, if anybody's having a sale, stock up, buy some of everything and play with them. There's a lot of fun needles out there, you know, the ones with 2 holes and losing the wing needles. Those are kind of cool. Okay. Let me, I got sidetracked, sorry, on needles. But I think I covered everything on the needles on the metallic thread. Oh, fun fact. Metallic needles used to be called Metallica, but the band made them change the name, cease and desist. So now they're just called metallic needles. If you have any old ones that are called Metallica, I don't know, maybe they'll be worth something someday. Probably not. You might get sued. I don't know. So that's the, I did have something to share with you about variegated threads. So when you're buying a variegated thread, you want to look at the end of the spool to see what the color really is going to look like. If you just look at the side, it's really hard to tell what it's going to look like. I'm sorry, it's hard to, the camera is having a hard time focusing on all these things I keep holding up, but it's pretty obvious on these color changes that you want to look at the side, the end of the spool to see where, and you can't always on every kind of variegated thread to tell, but that's the way. It's just a little tip there in the medium weights. Right, also in medium weight, I have hand quilting thread. So hand quilting thread, whether it is, no matter what brand, has a glacé finish on it, has a little bit of a finish on it. Do not use this in your sewing machine, ever. It's not meant to go through your sewing machine. So you'll end up with skip stitches. It could damage not damage your tension discs, but it's going to get gunk on them. That glacé finish will come off on them. So any hand stitching, hand quilting thread, do not use on your machine. Other than that, play with all the threads on your machine. This is a wool thread. I have 2 different ones. This one is by Enziana, and this one is by Wonderful. They're both wool acrylic blends, and they are designed for embroidery, and they do a lovely job with embroidery, but you can use them on your machine as well. You do want to sew a little bit slower. You might want to decrease the because they break pretty easily. Well, not that easily. If you're free motion stitching, that one does. If you're free motion stitching, they'll break a little bit easier. So you definitely want to sew a little bit slower. And if you're free motion stitching, use an embroidery needle, not a microtex. Yeah. So let me see. Bridget asked about 50 weight for piecing. So in my book, and if you were in person, you would get one of these to feel. So this is a little, of course, it's backwards. So in my book, it's a section 2. It's one of the first things we do, and it's stitching with the ultrafine, fine, and medium weight threads. So you can actually feel the seam difference. Like if you have a sewing group, one person can do this and pass it around, because not everybody needs to do this. As soon as you feel it, you're like, oh, I see the difference between the medium, the fine, and the ultrafine threads. This one, you can hardly feel the seam. And this one, it's like, wow, it's like there's a mountain seam there. Which I forgot to mention, the ultrafine threads and the, depending on the project and how you tear away your papers, if you're doing paper piecing, a complicated project, these ultrafine threads will save you so much grief. You do have to be a little bit more careful tearing with the papers so that they don't stretch, because they are a little bit stretchier. So yeah, it's really, those ultrafine threads are great for paper piecing. Okay, let me check and see if there's any other questions. So I hope that answers your question, Bridget. Any other questions about... Okay, let's go to the heavy threads. So heavy threads that fit in your upper thread guide in your needle are 12 weight. 12 weight is the heaviest that you can put through your upper tension disc. Now, because you can use a heavy needle and you could put an 8 weight through your tension disc, don't do it. Unless you have a really old extra machine where the tension discs are shot and you don't really care, you can use a bigger needle and put it through and sew just fine. But don't do it on your usual machine, because the problem isn't that it won't fit. The problem is it pushes the tension discs away from each other, and so then they're going to lose their ability to clamp down on the other threads. So that's why you don't want to do it. The heavyweight threads are so much fun. 12 weight, they have such a bold look to them. They're I hand stitch with them and machine stitch with them, and they come in lots of different colors. Wonderful has solids and variegated. There's also rayon. 12 weight rayon. There was 12 weight rayon way before there was 12 weight cotton. So it's pretty easy to find 12 weight rayon, and that also comes in variegated, and same thing. It's got beautiful sheen to it. The jeans weight, if you're someplace where you don't have a big thread selection, the Coats & Clark dual duty heavyweight, that is about a 12 weight. They don't usually have a lot of colors. They have like blue jean colors. That's about it. But the heavyweight threads are just so much fun. I don't know that I have an exact example without taking a lot of time to find it, but they're just really fun to play with. They make such a bold statement in your stitching, and I love using them when I'm doing free motion stitching and outlining things. It gives you such a clear definition of the lines. I think they're really fun. Right, I wanted to talk. Let me go to the ultra heavyweight threads. Now the ultra heavyweight threads are 3 and 5 weight. So these are more your embroidery threads. And 8 weight. 8, 3, and 5. So 8 weight, 3 weight, and 5 weight. Cotton or rayon. It's hard to find anything bigger than an 8 weight in rayon. So these cannot go through your top tension guides. Absolutely not. Unless you have that really old machine that you don't really care about if it never works. But you can use them in the bobbin. It is so much fun to use these threads in the bobbin. Every time you turn it over, you're sewing upside down, and then you turn it over and it's like, oh my gosh, it looks so cool. I have a sample right here. Let's see if I can find it. I should have backed these so I could see them in my book. Here. So this is an example. Hopefully you can kind of see if the camera can. So this is free motion stitching over here, and these are program stitches. Can't see them really well, but they're just super fun. Maybe you can see it on this sample. So you can also use silk ribbon in the bobbin, wrapped in the bobbin. So these, oh yeah, you can see those better. So that is silk ribbon wrapped around the bobbin and stitched upside down. So it's stitching like this. And you can use a heavyweight thread in the top. You can use an ultrafine thread in the top. You could expend the rest of your life experimenting with different thread weights in the top and bobbin and different looks and different stitches and get so much fun. Well, you never want to leave your sewing machine. The simplest stitches for stitching using these heavy threads in the bobbin work the best. You don't need a lot of complicated stitches. Really, the utilitarian stitches I have found work the best. Zigzag and, well, of course, I can't remember what the names of them are. The one that goes like this. Anyway, so just the utilitarian stitches. My first machine only had like 10 stitches, and they were all utility stitches, and I had so much fun just playing with them. Because if you use a heavy thread in the top and a 12 weight thread in the top and the heavy thread in the bobbin, you can have two different colors and they play with each other, or you can have an ultrafine thread in the top and then you don't see the other thread, and you just can get so many different looks. It's so much fun having a play with those. But again, don't put them through the top. This one is particularly fun. I want to talk about. It's called Dazzle. Oh, you can't really see it, but this is rayon with a little bit of metallic in there. It's so fun. You can also use 12 weight. This is DMC 12 weight pearl cotton. It works in the top. I just put this on my little spindly thing and pull it off. So it's hard to find it in different colors though. And usually they're very pale colors. I think it's mostly for, I don't know, embroidering baby stuff maybe, because I've only seen really pale colors. These heavier threads are also great for, I'll talk just a minute about hand embroidery. I use all thread for hand embroidery. I have a sample here. Sorry, I've played with all these threads so much. I have all these samples, but I can't buy them very quickly. In order. I'd be doing this if we were in public too. So, I mean, you know, in real life, looking through my book, looking for the page. I never mark them. Here it is. So this very top here is embroidery with a 100 weight thread. And then it's going down and down with different weight. Sorry, this one, 100 weight. So ultra fine, fine, medium, heavy, and ultra heavy with embroidery. It's so much fun to try those different threads. These little itty bitty tiny French knots. Oh my gosh, if you're doing little dolls, it'd be like little freckles or little strawberries. So fun. So don't hesitate to try all your different threads for different things. Just because something calls for one thread, you know, you play around, see what you like, do some thread experiments. I use floss a lot, cotton embroidery floss. I don't use that in the machine at all. It's just because of the way the strands separate, it may end up with the needle going through them and creating a kind of a rat's nest, which is no fun. I will say that there's been a little image going around on social media where they're comparing embroidery floss 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strands with pearl cotton. It doesn't work. Pearl cotton is round, embroidery floss is flat. So if you're like, oh, I only have, you know, I need 2 strands of this, so I'm going to use a 12 weight pearl cotton, it's not going to give you the same look because embroidery floss is flat, pearl cotton is round. It may not matter for your project, but if it does, you might want to just be aware of that. Let me check questions if there's any new questions. Oh, thank you. So what size needle do you use for heavy and ultra weight threads? So for the heavy threads, it all goes back to what your project is. So for the heavy threads, I generally use a 90 embroidery because I am almost always, 80% of the time, doing free motion stitching. A lot of my work is collage, and it's all free motion kind of raw edge applique, I guess. So that's what I use. If you're with the 12 weight thread, you can use an 80, size 80 needle, 80, 12, 90, 14. Sorry, I know some of you are from different countries. So, but I try and use the smallest needle that I can for the heavyweight threads. Now, when you have the threads on the bottom, it doesn't matter what needle you're using. Match the needle with the thread you're using in the top. So if you're using a 12 weight in the top, use a size 90, 14. If you're using an ultrafine, you can use a 60, size 60, because you're matching it to the top, not to the heavy thread in the bobbin. Hope that makes sense. So needle size for free motion quilting with 60 or 80 weight thread. So you can use a 70, size 70 needle for I would use an embroidery needle if you're doing free motion. If you're using the 80 weight thread, you can use a size 60. needle. And I didn't talk about quilting needles because I know not everybody here is a quilter, but quilting needles are not for piecing. They are for the actual quilting because they have a little bit of give so that when you're, and they're going to stay straight when they go through all the layers, which is why it's different from a piecing needle. It's just a little bit different. But you can quilt with an embroidery needle. That's what I do. However, I'm not an award-winning quilter. I never will be. I'm not that precise. It's perfectionist. I was a perfectionist. I'm still a recovering perfectionist. So I try and avoid perfectionistic things whenever I can. So I hope that answers your question. One other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, here's one of my samples of stitching with the heavy thread in the bobbin. So here's one of the cool things you can do. You can stamp an image on the back of your project and then follow the outline. And then everybody's like, oh my gosh, you did that free motion? That is so amazing. You are just such a fantastic stitcher. You're like, yes, thank you. Thank you so much. You don't need to tell them that you just followed the lines on a stamp. So our little secret, right? It's really fun because you can draw on the back. And this leads me to a quick discussion. I know it's getting close to the hour and I don't want to keep you guys all day, but like I said, I haven't talked about thread for over a year and a half and I'm just having so much fun. I hope you're enjoying it too. So you notice I have a stabilizer here. Stabilizers are your friend and they are very, there's just not much information about stabilizers out in the world and fusible webs. People confuse the two. And here's what I did in my book. It's the first thing in my book, first exercise that you do. And this is another good one to go through. I wish you guys were like here in person because then you could really handle my book. So this one is a fusible web exercise where you fuse all these things together. Oh, sorry, that one's stabilizers. And this one's fusible webs, where you make little samples of each of them so that you can understand what they feel like, how they change the hand of your fabric, and how they help you with your stitching. Because that's what they do, is they help you. And I don't know if there's very many garment people on here, but I love using the garment stabilizers interfacings to stabilize my my work that I'm doing, like this piece here. This is just a tearaway craft stabilizer. So stabilizers and fusible webs are, like I said, super confusing. The fusibles are glue. Just think of them as glue. Yes, they do change the hand of your fabric, so they do stabilize your fabric. But their main job is to glue two things together. So that is their main job. A stabilizer, its main job is to add stability so you can add stitching. And there's tearaway stabilizers, washaway stabilizers. So much fun with washaway stabilizers. I can't begin to tell you. I wish we were together. This is using washaway stabilizers, making this thread embroidery. This window is with washaway stabilizer. So many fun things to do. But it's also really confusing. This is just one brand, all of their different stabilizers and fusible webs. So one of the things I suggest is that you get together with some friends, make a little stitch group, and each of you go and buy a 1/4 yard of a bunch of different stabilizers. They're very inexpensive. And then just make some samples, play with them, see how they work. You can do these little samples that are like 2 by 3. Fuse them, just lay them on there, stitch on them, see how they help, how they don't help. And it's amazing how much of a difference that they make, making your life easier, especially if you're doing a lot of free motion work. It really keeps everything from all the threads from drawing up and giving you problems. Now, the one last thing I want to talk about is tension. I usually talk about it with the metallic thread, but I forgot. So tension, perfect tension is not a setting on your machine. It's the play of these two threads landing right in the middle of the fabric so that the top thread doesn't show on the bobbin on the bottom and the bobbin thread doesn't show on the top. That is what perfect tension is. And The new machines, a lot of the new machines will try and take care of it for you, and that's all good. But if you don't have one of those machines, you want to learn how to understand your tension. I do have a separate video. I have to do a new one, but it's in YouTube, and it's on changing your bobbin tension and changing your top tension. I don't have a video on, but I'll make one. So we've been taught not to touch that tension dial, not to play with it, and especially don't touch your bobbin tension. Oh my gosh, the world will end. Well, ladies, if there's any gentlemen here, your machine comes with a screwdriver. It's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Learn how to use it. Learn how to adjust your tension, your bobbin case, so that you can play with all these threads. It gives you so much power over your machine and your understanding of what's really happening and your ability to troubleshoot. I had one student come to class when I was doing my 5-day thread class. She had taken her machine and gotten it all tuned up. And as soon as we got to the free motion stitching, it was not working. Her machine just was a mess. And so, she was freaked out because, this was a very expensive 5-day class, and she just paid all this money to get her machine serviced. And finally, she let me in to go change the bobbin case tension, and it was just set too tight. So it was just ruining everything that we were trying to do. So, once she understood that, it was like, oh my gosh, the world is your oyster. You can stitch anything when you understand how those top threads and bobbin threads work. I always suggest you do a tension exercise. That just playing with your different threads and trying out different tensions, like what works, what doesn't work. And when you do that tension exercise, sorry, I know it's another thing for me to look for. It should be at the front here. You want to do a zigzag stitch. Oh, you definitely can't see that. So you want to do a zigzag stitch. When your machine technician always sends you home with a little zigzag, because it's on the zig and the zag that your tension problems will show up. The bobbin thread will come to the top, or the top thread will go to the back. So do a zigzag pretty widely spaced so you can see it, and try it. My machine, sometimes I stitch with 0 tension. Depends on what I'm stitching and how fast I'm going, because especially if you're free motion stitching, you are part of the tension system. And if you're like this, your tension is going to be different than if you're like this. Have a glass of wine, but only one. You don't want to run over your finger. So play around with that, and I will try and get that video up. It's on YouTube, so you can go look at it. It's kind of old, so I'll try and do a new one. But the information's the same. And if you just Google Liz Kettle bobbin tension, it'll pop right up, so you can find it. Let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, somebody asked if it will be available somewhere else. Yes, this video will be available. You can come back into Crowdcast using your same link and see it, and then I will put it up on YouTube and Vimeo. But before, I know we're getting close to an hour here, and I don't want to keep people too long, but I have so much information to share. I really want to talk to you about my new platform, Patreon. So part of this problem with this pandemic is, I was just going around doing my teaching thing, and then boom, pandemic, I can't teach anywhere. Well, I'm a teacher more than I am anything else. I'm a little bit of a mad scientist in the studio. I want to test everything. I get very analytical, and I want to see the reasons why everything works or doesn't work. And just because somebody said it didn't work, is that the truth? Or can I make it work? So I found out that I was kind of stalled out, not being able to teach and share, but I also had time to think about how I want to share and who I want to share with. And another thing that came to light during the pandemic is that we have an entire generation who doesn't know how to sew, but they need to know how to sew. They need to know they need to know about thread. They need to understand all these different things. And I also feel really strongly that part of the problems in our culture today is because we've become too left brain oriented, and we aren't spending enough time in our creative selves. A lot of people have had a lot more fun during the pandemic because they started crafting. It's like, holy cow, what have I been missing? This creative side of me. One of my little lines that I always say is, when your left side and your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere play together, that's when your genius happens. because our brains are meant to work together. But in today's culture, we really only are focusing on the left brain, on the hard facts that we can know. And right brain stuff, creativity, it's not quite so easy. It's very nebulous. It's hard to pin down what's right and what's wrong. And I have some very clear ideas about what's art and what's not art. So I started a Patreon page, and I have a little button that you can click here that is check out my Patreon page. So I am launching it through this week. I'm launching it today, and I have a special founders level. So there are currently 6 levels. It's a membership site. If you don't know anything about Patreon, it's kind of like going to a big art studio, and it's full of artists doing their thing, and you can go hang out in their studios and chat with them, take a class, learn from them, buy them a cup of coffee, and just have fun. So Patreon's kind of like that, and it supports the artist. And my goal is to get more of what I know out to the world for free. When I was first taking a lot of classes, I didn't have any money to take classes. Now I can take any class I want, but I actually don't have time to take classes anymore either. But the times I could take a class were so precious and so few that it took me so much longer to get to the level of artistry that I wanted to, the level of permission in being an artist. And I want to help other people not have to suffer through that. I want people to be able to have access to all the information. So Patreon, it's a membership site. So I have different levels of membership. The most inexpensive one is kind of the buy me a cup of coffee. It's $5 a month, and you get Thread Tech Tuesdays, which is kind of Ask Me Anything. Doesn't really have to be thread related, but that's a nice alliteration, Thread Tech Tuesdays. So you can ask me all the questions you have, and I'll answer them. And I'll give you some behind the scenes peeks of what I'm doing. The next level up is for creative stitch meditation. Those people who are working with stitch meditation, but maybe want to go a little bit deeper, want to be in a community where we're really focused on it and have some guided meditations. I'll be doing videos of my actual meditations so that people can kind of see my process and my thoughts behind it, how I work. The next tier is the Creative Explorer, and that's a tier where I have I'll have all my tutorials and videos now that I have all the equipment. I can do these videos where I get some of the stuff that's in my brain that I get it out to the world. I really don't want to travel and teach very much anymore. It's hard on me. It's hard on my family. And I've got all these grandkids now that I want to spend time with. So this is a great way for me to give you all that knowledge and for you to help me pay it forward to all the people who need this information and don't have it. So that's going to be fun. You also get a little gift from me once a quarter. And then the next level up from that is the Creative Genius. And that level, we're going to go a little bit deeper into creativity, about making art, about patterns that are keeping you from being successful. I made a little reference to left brain, right brain. I am kind of a brain geek, and I've done a lot of research in the last year, actually the last 6 years, about the brain and why it's divided. And it's so fascinating, and it explains so much of why we get stuck, where we get stuck. So I'm going to be sharing some of that stuff in there, and we'll have live streams where we get together and chat, and that'll be it's just, we're going to build this fun community and change the world one stitch at a time, which is my tagline. I've been using that tagline for a long time, and I really didn't know how I was going to do that. But then I had a chance to really explore deeper into Patreon. So if you go check out my Patreon page, for 1 week, the 2 top tiers will have a founders level. So they're discounted 20%. And you get that discounted price for as long as you are a member. And it's a monthly membership. You can cancel at any time. And just email me if you have any questions about it, and I'm happy to answer them. And you can go on the Patreon page and look for it. And hopefully that link is working. And let me know if you have any other questions See if there's any other questions in here. Oh, let me see. Any updates to the book since it was published? No, there have not been any updates to the book since it was published. Unfortunately, Roberta, the book was not a huge seller because it wasn't marketed very well. It was marketed mostly to quilt shops, but really they had the best sales at Joann's, because it's really it's not just a quilting book. It's all about thread and embroidery, and it was so broad that they just weren't really sure how to market it well. So there haven't been any updates or changes. Thanks for asking. Okay, and the needle size to use for metallic threads depends on what you're doing. Generally, I use a size 90. I'm going to be just totally honest. I use a size 90 embroidery pretty much 75% of the time, unless I'm sewing a garment. The 90 embroidery, I have a lot. I buy those by the hundreds because I use them so much. All right, finish the. All right. Oh, did the link pop up for the Patreon page? Let me grab it real quick and put it in the chat. It looks like maybe it didn't. Like I said, it was my first time using Crowdcast, so maybe I didn't get it up properly. Hopefully that will work, that link. And I will put it up on my website. I haven't had a chance to do that. One of the reasons we moved to Washington State was to be near grandkids, and I am taking full advantage of that. I get to, August is kind of my last month before they go back to real school. So I've been kind of babysitting a lot and helping out and having a great time. I highly suggest you all go swing in the park. Go at night if you're afraid anybody's going to see you, but swinging is so much fun. And when you've got your grandkids with you, nobody looks at you like you're weird. I have one last funny thing before I leave. Thank you all for staying so long. I know this has been, was a little over an hour, but my youngest granddaughter is just a year and a half. And I swear, if everyone walked like a toddler walks, we would all just be so much happier. We would, of course, we'd all have to do it. Otherwise you would look goofy, but their whole body walks when they walk. They have such a good time. They feel so comfortable in their bodies. So maybe we can all start walking like a toddler. Everybody just be happier, I think. Okay. I put that in. All right, let me see. Did that? I don't have the same page. Oh, here we go. Oh, there's the Patreon link. Sorry, I had to click another button. There we go. And then in the thing. So thanks for checking out my Patreon. Thank you so much for coming. My intention is to offer more free content because I know so much. And I do have classes on my website, static, kind of you just take them anytime classes. But personally, as a teacher, I find them very unsatisfying because nobody ever asks a question. And so it's not very, there's no connection. And for me as a teacher, I really want to be connected. That's why I was so excited to find Patreon, because it's a way for us to really connect deeper and have conversations, and I can share more of what I know. So thank you so much for attending.